Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you want more bonus material and to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/La Vie Creative. And also don't forget to check out Amazon, where you can pick up my new book, Paris, A Life Less Ordinary. In the book, I talk about my creative adventures in Paris, from starting my business to being homeless, hello, starving artist, to how I met all these wonderful creative people. Don't forget to check it out on Amazon. And also thank you so much once more for listening and for your support. Enjoy the show. So welcome back to Paris History Avec Hemingway. I am here with Claudine Hemingway, and we are talking about Madame de Pompadour today. And I'm curious if you've heard of this woman. A lot of people have, at least if you visited Versailles, you've probably heard her name floating around. We've mentioned her in some of our other podcasts, but you're going to learn all about her crazy history today.
Yeah, Madame de Pompadour she's a pretty fascinating story, as all of these people are, of course. But she was actually born Jean Antoinette Poisson, and she was born December 29th, 1721 in Paris. Her father, Francois Poisson, was a food commissioner, and during the famine of 1725, he was accused of fraud and for trafficking food when trying to make a little extra money on the side of his own, and he was forced to flee France. So he had to leave France. He went to Germany, and so their home that they lived in, everything that they'd had was seized. And so now, Jean and her mother were left in Paris, and two men stepped in to help look after them.
How nice.
So her mother, Madame de la Motte, had two men. So there was Charles Francois, Paul Nemours, and he ended up becoming her legal guardian. Some people think that he might have actually been her father. So maybe that's why he did it so easily. Jean Paris de Montmartel also was another man, but he wasn't featured in their life quite as much as old Charles Francois.
Interesting.
So she was, when she was older, a little bit older, she was sent to the Ursuline convent and was educated there among a lot of the other, the elite of Paris. And so when she was 9 years old, she ended up having to go home because she felt so sick. She was in really poor health. So her mother, what you do when you don't feel well, you go to a fortune teller.
Of course. I mean, that makes perfect sense. I still do that today.
Yeah. So she was told, very young, here she's like 9 years old, that one day that she would hold the heart of the king.
Wow.
And so after that, they called her Reignette, which basically means little queen. And so she grew, they basically, from that moment on, raised her and trained her to be the mistress of the king.
So they were really believing in that fortune telling.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems weird that your mother would be like, all right, this is what we're going to do.
I mean, but as we've learned from our other history lessons, that's kind of was the only path for a woman to like make any money.
There was, and being the mistress of the king wasn't a bad deal until it was over.
Yeah.
Yeah, once it was over, it never really ends well. But so he ended up her, guardian / maybe father, but hired the best teachers for her to teach her painting and theater and dance and the arts. And so it was basically like they were just raising her to become this like educated, cultured woman that was going to someday find the heart of the king.
So weird.
Yeah. So in 1740 at 19, which was so old to get married in these stories, she was married to a man named Charles Guillaume Le Normand d'Artois, and he was a nephew of her guardian / maybe father. And so Tournheim was so happy about this. He made his nephew the sole heir to his incredibly huge fortune, cutting out all of his other children and grandchildren. Which doesn't go over very well with the family. So he gave the newlyweds the Chateau des Étoiles, just 17 miles outside of Paris and on the edge of the forest of Seney. And so the marriage was very happy, and she told him that she would always love him, but with an understanding that she could leave him for the king.
I mean, I love this. That's like the perfect wedding vows, like, yeah. I love you until the king takes me away.
I mean, this is all about like, this is way before The Secret came out. Like you just put it out there in the universe and you just keep it.
The hell out of that. I mean, she had her vision board.
Yeah, she secreted the hell out of it. So she, they were actually pretty happy. They had 2 kids, a son in 1744 who died months later, and a daughter, Alexandrine, who died when she was 9 years old. So she ended up she was a fixture at like all of the salons in Paris. We have brought her name up, but like we said many times, we brought her name up with Ninon, with quite a few of the other people. She met at the salons. She met Voltaire, Montesquieu, Fontenelle. She met all these people so she was like very, she was in the right place at the right time. And so she started having her own salons, and Voltaire would come and the Cardinal de Bernay would attend. And it was, now it's starting to spread even more and it's getting to court. So it was at the salon where she learned the art of the conversation, and she knew exactly how to talk to people and, what things to bring up. And she was very smart with what she did. Mm-hmm. And so in 1742, they were already talking to her about her at the court of Versailles. She knew Louis XV hunted in the forest by their chateau. So she made a plan to meet the king.
So I guess her marriage wasn't so happy.
Yeah. So this is just amazing. So one day in a pink carriage, wearing a blue dress, she basically cut right in front of his path without stopping, just like ran right in front of them. And he saw it, and he was, thinking, oh, who's this person in the pink carriage? A few days later, she takes a blue carriage in a pink dress.
Wow.
Apparently you have multicolored carriages at your disposal.
As one does.
And so she does it again, and she just keeps going. She doesn't stop. So Louis XV, of course, is like, who is this person? He, hears about her, and as a gesture, a grand gesture, he sent her a whole venison as a gift.
I mean, how sweet. That's the way to a woman's heart.
Nothing says love like a dead deer.
Or a pink and blue carriage, I guess. I
know, exactly. It's so strange. So, but his fascination started growing quickly with her, and he was just like, who is this person? His current headmistress, the Madame de Châteauroux, had heard about Pompadour and was just like, who is this woman? And she was getting a little worried. So she was trying to, keep her away from court, but she couldn't. And Louis XV was, still really interested in her. On February 24th, 1745, she was invited to attend a mass ball at Versailles to celebrate the marriage of the Dauphin, Louis de France, to the Infanta Marie Therese of Spain. And
Mm.
so she came in there and it was a masked ball and everybody was in costumes. She dressed as Diane the Huntress, of course, so fitting for her crazy carriage rides.
Of
And
course.
so she kind of floated into the ball. Louis the 15th was dressed along with seven of his men. They were dressed as trees.
What?
I know, a little strange.
This sounds so not sexy. Like she's like the huntress and he's a tree.
I know. It's like, I know, I'm going to be a tree. That'll get her. So he couldn't stay away from her, and everyone could see that. And he basically was like infatuated with her. 3 days later, on February 28th, at the Hotel de Ville in Paris, in front of everyone, he publicly pledged that his undying love to her.
As one does. I hope
Yeah.
he brought a dead deer.
I know. Hopefully, yes, and a dead deer. And so right after that, a few weeks later, she moved into Versailles. So, the husband was probably like, well, I guess that had to happen.
He told me at the beginning. This
It
was
cracks me up that all of these stories, there's always these women and they're married and then they're just like, I wonder there's some of them that kind of freak out, but most of the husbands are like, yep, that's just what happens. What's he going to do? Compete with the king.
yeah, I mean you can't really compete with the king as like
Yeah.
game.
So she was moved into the bedroom above his, and of course, if you go to Versailles, I'm sure you've all heard that the secret doors that are basically flush to the wall. They don't. You have to really look to see them, but they have staircases behind them. And not only did that's where Marie Antoinette was able to escape, but it also allowed the king to go visit his mistresses. So on May 7th, the officials finally separated her husband, and which was a huge thing back then because that wasn't something that was easily able to be done there. But I guess when you're the king, you can make that happen. But she had to have a title. You had to have a title to be at court. So he ended up purchasing the Marquise de Pompadour and the estate. So she now had a title, a chateau, and her very own crest.
Wow. I mean, it's so crazy that a fortune teller told her this and the family
I
just
know.
groomed her and her husband was on board. I mean, what happened to that guy? Where'd he go? I guess her kids both passed away, so she was over
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So on February 14th, 1745, she was formally introduced at court because you had to be introduced. Somebody had to sponsor you. Somebody had to walk you in, introduce you. So it wasn't just kind of like, oh, here's a new mistress. It was like this very formal, there was a huge like pomp and circumstance that went into everything.
Sounds very French.
Yeah. But she also kept a really close relationship with the queen. So she was so close. She was really close, and she was trusted by Louis XV. And she was basically like the de facto prime minister of France.
I mean, keep your enemies closer, right?
Yeah. So she had so much influence over him. He would talk to her and ask her advice on just about everything. And this is Louis XV. So, most people know Louis XIV, of course, and Louis XVI because, he lost his head. But Louis XV kind of didn't do the crazy, huge, sweeping issues that the other two had. He just kind of was with the one in between that, was quite the Lothario and had all the ladies.
He was a placeholder.
He was right there in the middle. So their affair lasted from 1745 to 1751. And in that time, he gave her tons of chateaus.
I love it. I'm so jealous.
And the two of them would basically like redesign and work with all these artists, like all these different Rococo artists, especially Francois Boucher. But the two of them kind of, would go through these chateaus, but then also redecorate everything. So she had a lot of influence on just about everything. She ended up getting pregnant 3 times with him, but all of them miscarried.
Oh.
And it just really started to take a toll on her health, and that kind of changed their relationship.
I guess she wasn't so interested in sex after miscarrying 3 times.
Yeah, no. So on October 12th, 1752, she was named the Duchess. And in 1756, she was the lady in waiting to the queen, which is the highest position a woman could hold in court. Like there's the queen, and then the lady in waiting is basically like the next biggest thing.
Wow.
So their sexual relationship basically ended, but they remained extremely close. She was the only person he fully trusted, and he went to her for every single thing. He had the Petite Trianon built for her, but she never saw it. She never saw it completed.
I love the Petite Trianon.
I know. So he was, she was this huge, but she loved the art. She loved painting. She loved everything. She was a huge supporter of them. And she would get most of them, she would get these artists that she would discover and she'd get them in front of the king. And so he could, like she helped develop their careers because that's the highest honor, of course, in France is to get to the king. And then you're, the king's official painter, which is about as good as you could get.
She helped the little guy.
Yeah. So sculptor Jean-Baptiste Pigalle, which, Pigalle is, where his name was given to. He created a bunch of different statues for one of her chateaus. And one of them is called Friendship. It's in the Louvre today. If you go into the Corbusier, on the middle level of it, there are a bunch of statues, and it's really interesting because they have this one of her is Friendship. If you look to the right, there's one of them that's the two of them together that's redone, and then to the right of that's one of Louis XV, and then to the right of that is his wife. So I always look at it as like this crazy triangle of how they placed all these things, like the wife, the mistress, and the husband.
I like it. It's all in stone.
Yeah. So she had with them, the two of them also created a porcelain factory in Vincennes that was later moved to Sèvres in 1759, which is everybody talks about Sèvres pottery. That's like the French, pottery in China. And they basically kind of started that together.
So they were like little entrepreneurs together.
They were little entrepreneurs. But she loved the arts. And so she learned how to do engraving on gemstones.
That's cool.
And Jacques Gouet taught her how to do this. And she had this whole, she had an engraving machine. Everything moved into Versailles. So she had a little craft room.
She's a crafter.
She was a crafter. She had a craft room. And she would sit there and engrave on emeralds and stuff, which just seems crazy to me. But Francois Boucher also taught her how to do engravings and printmaking. And so she had all the equipment brought in for that. And she loved books. And so she had her own printing press.
I mean, this sounds like my dream life, just chilling. I don't even have to have sex with the king. I got my craft room, that sounds like a good life to me.
You have multiple chateaus.
Yeah. And then I got my printing press,
Yeah. I mean, there are some downsides. Somebody's standing there watching you get dressed in the morning and you go to the bathroom on a chair in the middle of the room, but
I mean, whatever. I got castles.
That's true. You have some castles, but she also liked to have her own plays. And so she would put on these plays and she performed them at court. And so one time she played Pomone, who is resisting the advances of the god of the garden, Vertum. And that's one of the statues you see in the Louvre. And here it is, Vertum is wearing a mask and he's trying to hide himself to get close to her. Pomone. And he's trying to get close to Vertum and he disguises himself as an old lady. So the statue shows that he lifts his mask and then she sees who he truly is. But it's so much also of reminiscent of how they met.
That's
they're there to
mask. That's how they met.
Yeah, they're at this mass ball, and then he pulls it up. But I'll post some pictures. It is really interesting to see the juxtaposition of them. And I always feel kind of bad for the queen. I'm like, here she is standing for eternity in the Louvre, looking at her husband's mistress.
I mean, but they were friends, so it all worked out.
Yeah, she was her friend. So in 1753, Louis XV purchased a little place in Paris for her, the Hotel d'Evreux, which was later the Élysée Palace.
Oh, so pretty.
So she had a place to stay when she was in Paris. So she would split her time between there and going to Versailles and then her palace in Bellevue, just outside of Paris. And she would basically just move around there. At this point, there's nothing sexual between them, but he still considered her his closest advisor and person in his life. So the fact that the Élysée Palace used to belong to the courtesan or the mistress of the king kind of cracked me up.
And now the president lives there.
And now the president lives there. But on February 7th, 1756, he gave her another title, Lady of the Queen's Palace and the Chateau de Menard. And so now she has like 40 titles.
I was going to say, well, how many titles this woman got?
Yeah, but she's growing older. She's in very poor health. Like her poor health from when she was a child kind of always stayed there. She's really struggled with how cold and damp it was at Versailles. And so she moved up to a really small room in the attic where she could try to keep it warmer. On April 15th, 1764, she was only 42 years old. She died of a pulmonary congestion. And Louis XV was there holding her hand by her side.
This is so sweet. Oh my God. She was so young, 42.
Yeah. And she died at Versailles, which there was a rule that nobody was allowed to die inside the walls of Versailles but the king.
Whoa.
Which I'm not really sure how you control something like that. But
I think probably quite a few people died at Versailles.
I think so too. But of course, it was an exception because it was Pompadour.
Yeah.
So 2 days later, this huge funeral was held at the Église Notre Dame de Versailles, which is a beautiful church. It's a very short walk from the Chateau de Versailles. And the king was just completely distraught. Like he was having a very difficult time, even getting through it. She was then taken to Paris. She was buried next to her mom and her daughter at the Capucine convent.
That's sweet.
Today, that convent is gone. And she is basically buried beneath the sidewalk at number 3 Rue de la Paix.
So they just like mowed over that and like didn't dig up the bodies?
No. So she's literally thought to be under the sidewalk, not like under the building, just like right under the sidewalk.
But that's shocking because she was like a big deal.
Yeah.
Huh.
Some people think that she's missing some, back then, like once it gets to the revolution, all bets were off on bodies and where they ended up. But, that is where she was buried and she was never moved.
She's probably sitting in some French guy's living room.
Probably. Yeah. Like a weirdo that kept Henry IV's head for a while. But in her life, like her biggest thing, she didn't really, it was, of course, being the, mistress to the king, but she really was a huge promoter of the arts. And she even helped, she was one of the ones that really helped put the whole funding for the École Militaire. And also Place Louis XV, which came into Place de la Révolution, which turned into Place de la Concorde.
Interesting.
Yeah. But her name, a lot of people might know her name, and you hear Pompadour and you hear, there's the Pompadour hair and there's a Pompadour diamond. There's all these different things. The name given to the diamond cut that's called Pompadour it's kind of an oval shaped diamond. And he had it designed, Louis XV had it designed for her because it reminded him of the shape of her mouth.
That's interesting and weird.
A little weird. The Pompadour hair, the hairstyle is kind of the whole Elvis thing. I don't really know how that correlates with her. It seems like a little bit of a stretch. But the other old wives' tale is the coupe, where a lot of people would think that the champagne coupe was created on the shape of her breast. That's actually, not true. People say it's Marie Antoinette. We've talked about before. That's actually not true either. But her name, has been given to so many different things. The Petit Trianon that she never saw finished, she died before it was finished, was given to his next mistress, the Madame du Barry, which we will talk about again soon, which then, of course, became the home of that Marie Antoinette loved so much.
Yeah. Whenever I go to the Petit Trianon, I just think of Marie Antoinette. I didn't even know it was built for Madame de Pompadour.
Yeah, it was built for Pompadour. So there is a painting, it's pretty big painting. It's a pastel, and it's by Maurice Contant de la Tour, and he painted this in 1748 of her. And I'll put a picture up. But she's sitting there in a chair in this beautiful silver gray dress, and she's surrounded by books, and she wanted him to paint her with a remembrance of how much she was involved in the arts. It includes books that she had done and engravings that she had done, but she didn't want to just be remembered as the mistress. She wanted to also be remembered as like how intellectual and smart she was, and such a huge supporter of the arts.
I mean, when you think about it, it's really funny, this whole like mistress idea, because it's just, I mean, they basically were their wives. They were their wives of
Yes.
choosing, because the queen was just assigned to them. So like
Yeah.
there's this like negative connotation with like the word mistress, like she's just the side piece. But really in reality, it was more so his wife, just without the paperwork.
Yeah, I think there was actually like more feelings there. Like, when we talked about Madame de Maintenon and Louis the 14th, like I think with her, it being his second wife, kind of the secret wife, he was able to finally actually find true love, because marriages, like you said, that was just kind of, the marriages were all about politics and uniting different countries and ending wars. So there wasn't, and they were just assigned to you. You were married by proxy. You weren't even there when you got married. So I think these mistresses definitely were more of, more of an actual true love.
Yeah, that was like their chosen wife if they had a choice. It feels like the queen was more the mistress. Like,
Yes.
probably getting less attention than the mistress was.
Yeah, I think she was probably like a fancy roommate.
Yeah, she was a fancy roommate. And I'm sure the queens all had their little playboys too. They had their
Oh,
side
yeah.
because it's just a weird setup altogether. So it's so like the word mistress is like such a negative thing, but at the same time, I mean, in today's world, it's like, oh gosh, you're cheating on your wife. But back then, I feel like they were the actual true loves, and they were not mistresses by the term we know today. They were the actual love.
And, in French, it's maîtresse de tête. So it's like the head mistress is what the translation, but maîtresse sounds so much better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, fascinating. Thanks, Claudine, for teaching us again about all these wonderful women in history. And don't forget to tune in next week, guys, and check out Claudine's website for these beautiful photos of things that may be missing. You can see a sidewalk, where she's Go to ClaudineHemingway.com and tune in next week.
We'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.